Today I'm going to try and clear up a very confusing world of soft shells. Loads of people come in and go, where's your hard shells, where's your soft shells? So what is the difference, hard shell, soft shell? If someone said to me, have you got your hard shell? What I take that as is, have you got your waterproof jacket with you? Because the hard shell is quite crunchy, quite solid, and basically I always think that means it's got something with a membrane in it, so it's going to be waterproof and keep us dry. We understand what that means. They live on the waterproof wall. And then the other term that's just thrown around loads is soft shell. Now that is a much more confusing area. Hard shells, waterproofs, there's loads and loads we can talk about, but essentially they're waterproof. Usually not insulated, they're just waterproof jacket. Soft shells, that just covers such a wide spectrum and can be really, really confusing. So for example, someone comes in the shop and says, where are your soft shells? And it's like, there's our base layers, there's our waterproofs, there's our boots. Soft shells are kind of scattered about, and that's for good reason. So when you think of a soft shell, essentially what I mean is it's not waterproof. It isn't a waterproof jacket. It is something that is tough, stretchy, and usually quite weatherproof. So weatherproof or weather resistant is a bit of a term that can be very confusing, but essentially myself and most of us here at Outside would take it as it's not fully waterproof and it's not fully windproof. And that's what I like from a soft shell. So that often means it will take most of the edge off if it's blowing a gale. And if a quick shower comes or like a bit of spitting going on, it will cope with that. It'll run off for a bit. If it does get wet, it will dry very quickly. So you may think, well, if one's waterproof and one isn't, why don't you just wear your hard shell? Because that's fully waterproof. Well, as we all probably know, hard shells aren't nearly as breathable as soft shells. You might keep the rain out, but of course that means your hot air will get stuck inside and you can overheat really quickly and get wet from the inside out. If it isn't chucking it down with rain, you shouldn't be wearing a waterproof jacket in my eyes. And that's when your mid layer or your next layer could well be a soft shell. But like I've already mentioned, the soft shell world is hugely confusing. I think the traditional thought of a soft shell is something a bit like this. I had to bring my sons because I personally don't own one anymore because I don't really like them that much. It'll be a fleece-lined or insulated jacket with a not fully waterproof but quite thick outer face fabric, usually made of polyester with a bit of elastane so it can stretch. So why wouldn't I like a jacket like this? Even though you could wear it a lot of the time, it's tough, it's cozy, it breathes a bit. Well, they're heavy. So in my world, I don't really like this because once you're wearing it, if you're walking along and you're too hot, but that is your fleece layer and your weatherproof layer, you take it off, then you're too cold. The versatility isn't there. The two main compartments of the jacket I quite like, so let's try and keep them separate. And that helps me sort of talk about the next sort of thing I've got here that gets classed as a soft shell. So this is very similar outer face fabric to the jacket I just talked about that I don't like. So if you put a thick fluffy fleece underneath a stretchy, really light soft shell like this, you will end up creating a jacket like that. So when I'd use something like this is if I was out and there is a wind, there is a breeze, might be a bit of a shower in the air, but it's not that cold. So this will take the edge off. It's extremely stretchy and very comfy to wear. So I would wear one of those if I was, say, running or packing in my bag if I was going climbing to take the edge off, and it will stand up to a lot more abuse than something like a traditional wind shell, which might be lighter and pack a lot smaller. But that would use something like a Pertex fabric, which can easily rip if you are climbing or mountain biking or something like that. So it can feel nicer to wear, even though it's heavier and not quite as packable as a windproof. So while I'm on that front, all of these, which I'm talking about today, are all quite different forms of soft shell, yet the outer face fabric is nearly always polyester, and if it's got stretch in it, it'll be added with elastane. This is actually the OR Astroman, which I've really enjoyed. We sell really well with the Borealis from Rab. That's an absolute classic, very light, very easy to use. Wear it over a fleece if you want, and in the summer months you might just wear it on its own. And one of the other types of soft shell you won't often see in Outside, because you're not a huge fan, is sort of membrane soft shells. Now what I mean by that is they might feel very much like a soft shell and really tough like that, but some of the brands will stick that plastic sheet back in there so that you can actually call it waterproof. They might not take the seams, but once it makes it waterproof, all the things I like about it being a soft shell go out the window. Often the breathability drops massively. They're often not waterproof enough to be your fully waterproof jacket. So what was the point? Just let it be as it is and keep your waterproof in your bag for when it really, really rains. Quite a fan of the panelled ones. You know, if you had like waterproof shoulders on a mixed climbing jacket, yet soft shell down below, that works really well. But the whole thing being a membrane when it's meant to be a breathable, stretchy layer doesn't quite cut it for me. So while talking about that, you might just think, how does a soft shell become water resistant and weatherproof if it hasn't got a membrane in it? Well, it's to do with the fabric they're using. So often it's a really, really tight knit weave. Like I say, nearly always of polyester with some elastane for the stretch. But because it's so tight, you can actually keep a lot of the moisture running off it and be really tough to stop a lot of the wind getting through there. And then they'll get treated with a DWR, a durable water repellency, to help the droplets run off. But once it starts soaking in, of course, the water will come through because there is no membrane. However, the joy is when it does get wet, we are alive and we are creating heat. So we just push our hot air through this breathable fabric and it will dry it off really quickly. And I've got some examples here of sort of really thin ones. Then they can go a little bit burlier when you want to be sort of rock climbing in them or mountain biking, like I say. They're the main areas I think you want to use one. And they get a lot more durability the thicker they get. But then the breathability will slow and the weight will come up. Things like the classic Echo and the Squall that have been around for years are a rock climber's favourite, still light enough to throw in your bag, but give you enough resistance that you won't rip it on the crag. Also keep the weather off, particularly when you top out and you're sat at the top B lane. And then jumping over the trousers, I'll come back to them in a minute, a bit interesting. We've got other things that might be called soft shells, and I think they're incredibly different to what's going on over here. So on this side, I've got a couple of examples for you. I've got the Arc'teryx Proton SL, and I've got the Rab Alpha Direct. Now, basically, both of these things are insulating layers in my eyes, but a lot of people do call them soft shells because the outer face fabric is a similar construction as the thin thing down here, but sewn in there is an incredibly light backer like a fleece to help with breathability. Now you may be thinking, you hypocrite, you just told me you don't like your son's jacket. Well, that's because this one's heavy and it's bulky and the breathability is quite low because they've got such a thick outer on it. If you grabbed any of the face fabrics of these two jackets, they would look like a windproof. They're incredibly skinny. So with that backer on there that pulls moisture away, adds some breathability, adds some comfort and adds some warmth, you can really push your hot air out through this outer face fabric. So that outer face fabric is also very weatherproof, but it's not as stretchy and tough as these guys. If it was, it wouldn't be as breathable and it'd be a lot heavier and once again, not as versatile in my eyes. Now, if you do want to get really nerdy, yeah, you'd keep those apart as well. You could just have the inner and then an outer windproof and put it over the top if you like. But it's amazing how breathable they are. You can cope with just using this on its own a lot of the time. And I usually find I use those more with winter mountaineering and hill walking than I would climbing. Soft shells for when it needs to be really, really burly, but things like that for walking are brilliant. And then I like to layer with them winter climbing, put a hard shell on top of that, that's your waterproof, and it will trap some more hot air in. Breathability is still great, and these will suddenly become warmer than they were before you had that shell on. Often you'll find these jackets don't have the same amount of stretch as these jackets over here, because they're trying to do a different kind of job. They're more about the breathability, keeping the weather off. Why I'd wear those over a fleece, even though a fleece might be more breathable, is again that versatility. A quick shower comes through, this can cope with it. If the wind blows, you don't have to put your hard shell on because this will keep the wind out with that massive amounts of breathability. Now, jackets in this area seem to come and go. We quite often get told that we're about the only people who can sell them really well because they need talking about. Otherwise, they look really confusing. Because if you think about it, it's a fleece with a windproof, but it's better than that. It's more versatile. Classic things like the Vaporize from Rab and the Kinesis from Mountain Equipment, which has now moved on to like a Switch Pro. They keep coming back, we love them. They keep dropping away because sales aren't there, because people don't quite understand them. These are the most versatile bits of kit you can get. Get them while you can. A lot of these types of jackets seem to have a winter and a summer version. So probably our best selling thing in this area at the moment is the Aerotherm from Mountain Equipment. It's basically a really thin version of something like this with just a light grid on the back, that windproof area. Packs down really small, lives in your bag, really breathable, really versatile. I use it in spring just for running, climbing, whatever. And I'll also take it in winter as a part of my layering system. Absolutely brilliant. And even this jacket I'm wearing now can be classed as a soft shell. I love it. It's from Haglofs. I think it was called the Limb Barrier Hood, something like that. We've got a review. Check it out on our YouTube channel. But again, it's like two layers of soft shell fabrics with a bit of insulation in the middle. So it isn't any of these, it's something completely different. And again, really versatile, really usable and really tough. But how can all of these live under the same category as soft shell when they do such different jobs? So it's worth considering which area you're looking for. You might have been told by a friend, go and get a soft shell jacket, and you will think you need something like this. However, if you're walking and say active in the hills, I reckon 90% of the time it'll be something like the Aerotherm or the Vaporize or something like that with a pile backer to move moisture and keep the weather off. If you're rock climbing and you need it to be tougher, that's when you want these stretchy, really burly soft shells, so you can protect whatever's under it or just protect your skin from grit rash and things like that. Now, I said I'd come back to trousers. The reason I've left that till last is the fact that soft shell seems to be the only fabric that pretty much outdoor brands use for trousers. Now, the reason I think that is because all these ones on the top I talked about, you know, they've got different situations that can really perform and be used well. Now, our top half, which is the core that keeps you mainly warm, is the bit that fluctuates a lot in heat. So you want to change from maybe just a t-shirt 1 minute to quite a few layers to the next. It's a lot harder to do that with your trousers, isn't it? If you tried walking in your boxer shorts and putting trousers on halfway, quite hard with boots on. So the trousers have to be a lot more versatile. So soft shell will do that really well. Often there will be a summer or winter weight of trouser, and what that usually means is that polyester and elastane that is on the outer will just vary in thickness and density. The thinner the lighter, obviously the cooler it is in hot weather and more breathable and lighter, and the thicker it is, the more weatherproof, the less likely you're going to feel any wind through it and the more insulation you'll get from it. Once they get to the winter weight ones, they'll often brush the backer to give it a bit of fluff, which really helps with warmth and comfort as well. But the thin ones you actually want really smooth, so you can layer with them and put leggings on if you need. And I agree that's the right thing to do with trousers, because you don't often overheat down there in the same way you do your top half, and you just can't chop and change the same. Yeah, you need to put a waterproof trouser on if the heavens open, it's absolutely chucking it down. But even if they do get wet, they'll dry off really quickly. So I hope you found that quite useful. Obviously, there's lots to think about with soft shells, a very confusing area. Sorry I rabbited on for quite a while. I get quite passionate about this stuff. If you did enjoy it, check out all our videos on the YouTube channel, because we did an even longer one about winter layering, which actually had quite good reviews considering I rambled for a long time.